well, of course, you have always pro-transatlantic forces supporting the US and being very pleased for US support in Europe. That's a big part of the society that still believes in that. And secondly, you always have the ones criticizing the US in terms when we look back into the past, saying, well, that the US did not leave any room for Russia and for Europe to create a new European security order together with Russia in the 1990s, and that this is one of the core reasons of the war we have and the situation today. That's another position, and the third position is the ones, and that's again about among this view is particularly popular among the right-wing populist movement, saying, by doing so, they take the Russian perspective as well, saying that it's to a certain degree also the US fault that what's happening here, those people also think that Europe is not strong enough. Europe is the big loser in that war, in that conflict, while the US can only win. The US they get what they wanted. The NATO is now stronger than in the past. That countries that were very resistant to additional military budgets for the military, that they are now that this has changed. And those people also say that the US are benefiting from the war because they can now sell their liquid gas to Europe. And so those are different perspectives. But what's worrying me is the ones who are critical about the US, and that they are growing. So it's 20, 30 years ago. I still remember young people having the US flag in the bedroom, and there was a lot of pro-US approach was very popular among many people, and that has changed totally in the last 20 years, especially since the turn of the millennium. The world is changing, and at the very same time, people say, well, at least when Europe becomes stronger and gets apart from the US, Europe should at least get stronger itself, have a kind of a European military, or be more resilient to authoritarian countries. But we cannot see that either. And this is another form of disunity and a danger in the new world order. And we are now looking at Russia, of course, and the Russian attack against the West and played in Ukraine. But in fact, it's more about that. China is also an authoritarian country, and in fact, the West should close in. But I'm not so sure. It only does right now in the short term. But let's see what's happening in the mid and long term. But here again, my basic conclusion is we already have that conflict within our societies. The right-wing movements, populist movements, believing in authoritarian, at least to a certain degree, in authoritarian elements, through being critical about our liberal societies, and the ones trying to defend what we have reached. And that's a big danger of our time, is that the dividing line is not only between the West, the US, the West, Europe and Russia and China, but already within our societies. That's our weakness, of course, the weakness of our democratic system.
There is a lot of chatter, a lot of debate and a lot of different opinions in the U.S. and in Europe in foreign policy circles and so forth. And one of the things that you hear is that the bad performance of Russia and the mistakes that they've made and the bad performance of the Russian military, at least to date, and the performance of Xi's government in terms of the COVID situation, which has not been favorable, are casting a doubt or a pall over the overall concept of authoritarian leaders and the concept that people will say, yes, they can make decisions quickly, but because they're so focused on one person, they can make very bad decisions, and then you have no recourse. Do you feel that is affecting the debate in Europe about the nature and the desirability of authoritarian or semi-authoritarian systems?
It affects the discourse, but I would say mainly in academia, and in some newspapers, quality newspapers, there are comments or articles dealing with that, certainly, but it does not reach the wider population in any regard, I would say. But in fact, it's a very important issue. We've been talking so much about the weakness of our societies, but in fact, we should also look at the weakness of a authoritarian country like Russia. And there are two core elements of weakness we can observe right now. It's firstly, the misperception and miscalculation. It's a top-down system. You have a centralized leader on the top, and that leader, of course, accumulates only people around him who say yes. And that's the problem. When you have people only saying yes to what you're doing, then of course you have no critical view anymore. I think that's a very human effect and big problem of authoritarian countries. We have a wide discourse in our societies, an expert discourse and expert opinions and positions. They are core element of our decisions in our systems. So, of course, and for that reason, we always have a critical view. Sometimes maybe we are too cautious then in the end. But in authoritarian country, it's exactly the opposite, and that's one of the two major weaknesses. The second one is corruption and clientelism. State capture. In those countries, a small elite captures the state positions, and then they misuse public money. They siphon it off. They misuse it for their own private expenditures, for the private wealth. So a lot of money gets lost in the end. In most cases, it flows out of the country because the rule of law is weak. There's no guarantee of property rights. So what do those people do belonging to the ruling elite? They try to get the money out of the country as quickly as possible. And then they invested in property, in real estate, in big and nice yachts. And that's obviously what happened in Russia as well. So that's on the paper, I would say the Russian army seems to be very strong, equipped by best and new technology. In the end, a lot of that money was just diverted and went into dark channels. And that's certainly one of the reasons why the country and the military is much weaker than expected. And also in such a context, when you have this kind of top-down approach, authoritarian system, no private initiative, people do not take care about anything. So the equipment and in terms of existing materials and military equipment, there were nobody took care of that. So in the end, a lot of equipment was not ready for war. That's another core feature and another weakness of authoritarian countries. But here again, we should not underestimate Russia. They get a lot of money thanks to the export of oil and gas. They still have enough money, when we had this first round of sanctions, everybody was looking at the ruble exchange rate, which really went down, but now it's up again, recovered. And here again, thanks to huge oil and gas incomes. So Russia still has the money from the export of natural resources to carry out war in the long term, to be, to buy military equipment, to buy weapons, and that puts Russia in the short term and the midterm in a very comfortable position. In the long term, it might change, because when we really see the tendency away from natural resources, oil and gas, towards green energies, if that really happens in 20 or 30 years, Russia will be in a much weaker position. And then in the end, Russia will have missed the chance to diversify its economy. And, what's happening right now, in this constellation right now, Russia is again strengthening the oil and gas sector. The role of it is getting stronger and stronger, while the non-oil and gas sector is hit hard by Western sanctions. So in terms of technology transfer, knowledge transfer, this is weakening Russia in the long term dramatically, I would say.
It's a really complicated world out there. We've got massive inflation, recession fears, war in Europe, COVID, China issues. What the hell's happening? Everyone's got an opinion, but who's right, who's wrong? As co-founder of Real Vision, I've got my own view, but maybe I'm wrong too. And I want to go and find out more from real experts, real in-depth analysis. And I've hand-chosen my experts for this 2-week journey of discovery in global recession. Is everyone wrong? I've chosen people like Peter Zeihan to talk to him about geopolitics, David Rosenberg about the economy, and Pierre Andran, the world's most famous energy trader, about how to navigate the oil markets and where it's all going. This starts on May the 2nd, and I'm going to learn so much about what really is going on and how to best navigate it. Yes, not everybody's going to be saying the same thing, but it's going to allow me to piece together an investment framework to navigate these complicated times. Now, normally we'd give you a 7-day trial for $1, but because this is so important for all of you, and I think it's one of the most important pieces of content we've ever done, we're extending that free trial for 2 weeks for $1. So you get the entire campaign of all of these great minds. And it's only $1 for all of this. So just go to realvision.com/global recession to find out more and join me as I try and figure out what the hell's going on.